The 30-meter mark beneath the ocean surface isn't just a measure of depth, it's a critical boundary, a shadow line that dictates safety, protocol, and even the law in industrial diving, often determining life or death. We're exploring themes discussed on Abyss Profession, specifically the critical limit of 30 meters that separates inshore from offshore industrial diving. Many might assume underwater welding and cutting are solely for large offshore operations, yet a surprising amount of industrial carpentry happens just a few meters down, even in aquaculture. Maggie, this invisible line has profound implications, particularly when you consider the dramatic consequences of inadequate training and a lack of proper registration.
That's right, Thomas. In industrial diving, 30 meters isn't an arbitrary figure, it's a crucial technical and regulatory watershed. We refer to work in inland and coastal waters up to 30 meters as inshore. For these operations, equipment like baskets or diving bells aren't legally mandatory, but once you go beyond 30 meters, you're in the offshore realm, and that's where international law and guidelines impose extremely stringent safety standards. The use of a recovery basket or a diving bell connected to surface systems with hyperbaric decompression chambers becomes compulsory.
So, a mere depth difference legally mandates entirely different, far more complex equipment for safety. But if those complex systems aren't mandatory within 30 meters, does that mean the risk is inherently lower? Or does that flexibility become a trap for operators cutting corners?
Precisely. The flexibility in inshore operations can indeed become a trap. The source text points out that even for recreational activities, like those covered by Sicilian Regional Law 07 of 2016, there are specific limitations at 30 meters. If the law forbids a sports diver from exceeding certain limits without commercial justification, it highlights the absurdity of allowing unqualified personnel to undertake heavy carpentry on the seabed at similar depths. The strictness of this threshold is reflected internationally. The Regulated Profession Database, the European Commission's official resource for professional diving qualifications, shows Europe-wide safety regulations revolving around this 30-meter axis.
That's a powerful point. If a sports diver can't go beyond 30 meters for leisure, it's illogical that an industrial diver, engaging in far more dangerous work, would be less regulated. You mentioned aquaculture earlier. How does this 30-meter rule specifically apply to that sector, which sounds like it bridges inshore and offshore characteristics?
It's a critical area. Modern aquaculture isn't just about fishing. It's a significant offshore engineering and metalworking industry, often positioned in inshore waters. We're talking about massive floating fish cages, anchored by kilometers of chains, ropes, and metal frames. Divers primarily maintain nets and anchoring structures, performing underwater thermal cutting to remove damaged components, or installing sacrificial anodes to prevent corrosion. While welding interventions are minimal and typically reserved for emergencies, a diver might need to restore metal joints on moorings. Performing these tasks at 15, 20, or 28 meters, right on the edge of that critical 30-meter limit, demands impeccable management of gases, electric currents in the water, and bottom times. For an uncertified operator, the risk of embolism, electric shock, or drowning isn't just high, it's almost a mathematical certainty.
The dangers are stark then. Given these risks, how have authorities addressed what sounds like a historical free-for-all in the aquaculture diving sector?
Thankfully, the state intervened. Law number 25 of 2022, specifically Article 27 bis, officially established the category of divers for aquaculture systems, equating them in all respects to inshore diver professionals. In Sicily, this translates into ID Profile 362 of the Regional Qualification Directory. This profile is revolutionary, making it mandatory for anyone working in aquaculture to possess public training compliant with international IDSA Level 2 standards, which includes cutting and welding skills. Crucially, without registration in the electronic directory of industrial diving, you are not recognized as an industrial diver. You're an unregistered worker, lacking legal protections.
So these new laws are effectively closing a dangerous loophole that allowed untrained individuals to undertake high-risk work. But it sounds like these legislative changes weren't merely theoretical. They were likely a response to tragic real-world events. Can you elaborate on the human cost of not adhering to these standards?
Absolutely. Laws are often, as the source states, written with the blood of workers. The consequences of ignoring regulated training and mandatory registration are often fatal. Consider the case from the Eni shipyards in Congo, where a dramatic accident during underwater operations tragically underscored that industrial diving allows no shortcuts, even for energy giants. Closer to home, in aquaculture facilities before the 2022 decree, fatal accidents were quite frequent. Sports divers, often left alone to repair mooring chains, would become entangled in nets or suffer fatal embolisms because there was no surface control station or a standby safety diver.
That's horrifying. Is there a particular case that really exemplifies this lethal gap in regulation and oversight?
There's the tragic Piombino incident. In the Gulf of Follonica, a 39-year-old diver died while working inside a fish farming facility. He was violently hit in the head by the propeller of a moving support boat. Subsequent investigations revealed a crucial, undeniable truth. He wasn't a qualified industrial diving operator. He lacked the necessary titles like OTS or inshore diver, which are minimum training standards under Legislative Decree 8108 on safety at work, and wasn't registered in the electronic directory. He simply lacked the specific training required to navigate such a hazardous environment.
It sounds like a preventable accident. What technical analysis explains why an aquaculture facility is such a high-risk environment? And what's the difference in diving techniques that could have prevented such a tragedy?
CEDIFOP's technical analyses highlights the lethal contrast between scuba and surface-supplied diving. Aquaculture cage is a complex, three-dimensional maze of high-tension mooring lines, massive chains, and submerged nets. The primary danger is entrapment, but the definitive lethal risk is interaction with surface vessels. In recreational diving, you use tanks and are isolated. In these complex industrial settings, that's suicide. Regulated industrial diving, as taught at CEDIFOP, strictly forbids scuba. Operations are exclusively surface-supplied and controlled. This means divers use rigid helmets with umbilical cords for heavy commercial work or full face masks for specific contexts like aquaculture. These masks allow continuous breathing even with a temporary loss of consciousness, and communication with the surface is constant via integrated radios or signal lines.
So, the key difference is constant, real-time communication and surface oversight. In the Piombino tragedy, this vital element was completely absent then.
Exactly. In Piombino, none of that crucial safety infrastructure existed. The diver was invisible, isolated on the bottom with tanks. The distance between his work and the impact with the propeller was zeroed. The surface control station, with a tender monitoring every second of the work, could have ordered the boat's propellers to stop or commanded the diver to move to safety. This tragedy is a ruthless demonstration that safety isn't a cost. It's the only way to return home alive. We even saw this recently with the sinking of the superyacht Basion in Sicilian waters. Despite the international nature of the recovery, prosecutors and maritime authorities imposed very strict standards, constantly verifying the qualifications and Italian registrations of all operating technical personnel.
It's clear then that these regulations are not mere bureaucracy. The 30-metre mark, Law 25 of 2022 and Profile 362 of the Sicilian region are essential safeguards, particularly in environments like aquaculture. Anyone working underwater, especially near that 30-metre limit, must adhere to the same rigorous standards as someone on a major oil platform.
They truly are legal life jackets. If someone tells you a sports certification is enough for a fish cage, or that you can skip registration in the directory, they're putting lives at grave risk. Safety can't be compromised.
This conversation highlights the vital importance of understanding and respecting these industrial diving regulations. Share this episode with anyone who needs to understand why safety at sea is non-negotiable.